Thaddeus Turnpike, the second son of Jersey Turnpike and Silver Turnpike, grew up in rugged luxury. His mother was a mage of high sorcery, his father the lord of Dragon's Graveyard. As this broke several rules, Lady Silver forswore both political duties on her husband's behalf and on the towers. This was barely enforced, as Dragon's Graveyard is as far away from important things as you can be, until it happened to be next door to adventure. Much to Thaddeus's disappointment, he was born with an absurd amount of magical talent. Instead of spending all his time outside scraping his knees or learning how to properly wield the bizarre great axe that was the hallmark of his tribe, he could now only spend most of his time in those activities. Now, some of the time, he had to read books. Thaddeus was not a good student. Due to their distance, Thaddeus was allowed to stay with his family under the tutelage of his mother until he was 18. Rather than be immediately shipped to a tower. He talked his way out of it until he was 24. By the time he set out, he had grown to a respectable 6'3" and 220 pounds, learned to expertly wield the guoli, the heaviest kind of great axe, inherited his great-grandfather's, and picked up the martial abilities important to his culture: sailing, hunting, camping, cleaving a man straight down the middle with an axe. He also learned a surprising amount of magic from his mother, considering it meant sitting inside and memorizing things. Neither of them strong suits. But there was a burr in his magic, a blockage of either dedication to the craft or something more arcane. While getting himself lost, and generally taking the longest route possible to his destination, he found himself aboard an airship, which was attacked by a dragon. This was a big deal, for Thaddeus had always promised himself that if he were the first person to see a dragon since the cataclysm, he would slay it. After fleeing in terror, while an owl person valiantly struck the worm with arrow after arrow, Thaddeus thought about his life and his choices as the airship crashed around him. His anger at not having Featherfall prepared saved him, as he picked himself up from the rubble with just a scratch. What followed was his first adventure with Bubo, Aelric, Arlie, and Ispin, during which he grew a proud respect for Bubo, with his bravery in the face of a dragon, and became convinced that Arlie was bad luck due to her leaving her post. He also found his magic, for lack of a better term, starting when he needed it most. However, these spells didn't come without a cost. The burr grew. After the passengers were saved, Thaddeus thought that if he stuck around, he'd get got and finally be dragged to the tower. So he promptly left, after a bath. He got in the next town, as he had been in the habit of having his unseen servant carry his axe. What followed was a little over a year of training. His potential was noted, having passed the first test of initiation in record time. However, he was a poor student, not in retention of work ethic. If he was trapped here, he was going to try his best. His heart just wasn't in it, which did not make him popular with other students. While most wielders of the arcane arts are, politely, book nerds that breathe library air, Thaddeus's more kinesthetic-based learning caught the eye of the stewards of an obscure branch of the science that focused the potent energies into the body, for a more in-your-face expression of what magic was capable of. Despite the fact that Thaddeus could shave with his guoli, he lacked the finesse to properly harness these energies. He wanted to rage through armies when he should be dueling. They wanted him to fight like an inlander, and that was going to be a problem. Just as the argument was coming to a head, he was given dispensation to travel to Ispin's funeral. Over the year, the burr had become a bramble. The first group of people he bumped into on the way included Bubo, Aelric, and Arli. This was a problem for Thaddeus, as the gods clearly hated Arli, and this was all going to go very bad. He was also embarrassed to admit to Bubo that he had named his owl familiar Bubo out of his admiration of him in the few days they had traveled together. This was deeply embarrassing for Thaddeus. As everything went wrong around them, Thaddeus grew to think of his companions as a family, one that had kidnapped him and pressed him into service in a war, but still a family. The bramble became a thicket and was spent to turn on a machine that did gods only know. But none of that matters now, because Thaddeus Turnpike died in a royal of shadow-slicked miasma shot out of the mouth of an adult shadow dragon.